everyone. Thanks for being here today at the University Club in Madison, Wisconsin, for everyone in person and via our Zoom audience. My name's Chloe Green, and I'm the moderator here at Food in the Wisconsin Idea. And I'm also an undergraduate here at the University of Madison, and I work at the Kaufman Lab for Food Systems on campus. So we are here at our first episode of Food in the Wisconsin Idea of 2019. So again, thank you all for being here. And it's run through 6 different units on campus. And we usually will choose one to host, but we're trying something new, and we are all joint hosting this together. So our goal is pretty simple. If you've been here before, welcome back. And if you're new, we hope you get a hang of it, and because it's great. We tackle a different topic every month, and something that we think is really interesting to people across the state of Wisconsin in food. And this month, we're doing kind of like a round table, but around room and around Zoom, I guess, about what we would like to see in Wisconsin state policy for agriculture. So a couple things just to start off. To our people on Zoom, you will see probably a mic and a camera in the bottom, and you are muted right now, but we would love if you turned your camera on so we can see everyone, and especially for later when we invite you all to talk. Oh, and if you're calling on your phone and can't see anything, you can press *6 and we will get you. Before we fully dive in, we'd like to thank one of our special sponsors, which is the Willie Street Co-op, with 2 locations here in Madison and 1 in Middleton as well. And they share our love for food and food policy, and we'd like to thank them by watching a 60-second video that they've provided.
Willie Street Co-op is proud to be a supporter of Food in the Wisconsin Idea. Cooperatives around the state of Wisconsin have traditionally been at the forefront of bringing natural and organic foods to their customers. Cooperatives the world over are governed by 7 cooperative principles, and the 7th co-op principle is concern for community. Concern for our farmers, supporting their livelihood, keeping money in our community. For 44 years, we have worked diligently to grow our local food system. That's actually part of our mission statement, so it's really core to what we do every single day.
So thank you again to the Willie Street Co-op. And so if you joined us a little bit early, you might have seen that Greg had up some photos of some beautiful agriculture here in Wisconsin. It might have made you a little nostalgic for the warmer days and the greenness of summer. But so like we said, we're going to be talking about agriculture and agricultural policy in Wisconsin. And before I invite up Lloyd and Daphne Holterman to start our conversation, I just wanted to acknowledge that we know that right now there's a lot of farmers who are suffering from commodity prices and going down. And a lot of Wisconsin here is rural communities and being affected by these. So we want to acknowledge that and understand that it is a very important topic today, and to really how we can move forward in this new government and hear your ideas about how we can do this. So without further ado, I'd like to invite up Daphne and Lloyd Holterman. So thank you for helping us start to kick off this conversation. And I would first like if you could just tell us a little bit about yourselves and maybe how you met. A little bird might have told me it was through CALS, which I also am a CALS student, so have to be a fan of.
Thanks, Chloe. And it is really good to be here and talk about food and have conversations around food, because we love food. Besides producing it, we love to eat it too. Daphne Holterman, and I grew up on a beef and hog farm, actually straight south of Madison on the Illinois border. And I came here to Madison in college and majored in agricultural journalism at the time. Now it's called life science communications, but I discovered that I like communicating about food and farming when I was the Greene County Dairy Queen. So my hat's off to the Greene County Ag Chest for helping a young woman discover what her dream was, and it took me to where I am today, I guess. So I give them a lot of credit, and they worked with all kinds of producers in Greene County, and they still do. They still have the Dairy Queen program, a very positive thing. And came here, worked in communications out in the real world for about 13 years, and I've been farming almost 20 years, I guess, or more than that, actually, farming with Lloyd. And I'll let him tell you about how we met.
We met at a Halloween party here at UW-Madison. So actually, I went here 4 years, majored in dairy science, and then started on a home farm with my dad in a partnership that lasted a couple of years. And then Daphne and I ventured off on our own and ended up buying my dad out later on. But over time, we grew from 25% of a 70 cow herd was our partnership agreement to our current herd size, where we're milking 950 cows through our milking parlor 3 times a day. So over that time, I have to tell you that things are better than they were. We're producing more milk with less resources. Less gallons of water go for every pound of milk we produce. There's less waste produced for every gallon of milk we produce. We're using less chemicals than we did in the 1970s when I was growing up to control weeds. We're more fuel efficient. We're more efficient. We're more labor efficient. We have shorter work weeks than the 90-hour work week that my parents experienced. We actually probably, Daphne and I are now down to about 60 hours a week. So things are better. But if you pick up publications, that's not necessarily the message you get. So I guess that kind of outlines where we're at. We think we have a very efficient operation. We were profitable last year, and we've been profitable the last 4 years. So, but we took a different approach to things than maybe you have to keep rolling forward. You have to embrace technology and make it work for you. And that's where we're at right now.
Thank you. So you both. So bringing it back to our topic today, we're talking about state policy specifically, and we want to know how this can affect farmers and more benefit farmers, because we know that there are so many things that go into the food that we eat, and basically everything can somehow be related to food. So we'd like to hear from each of you a specific policy that you think should be enacted or how it can be worked on.
Well, I guess I'll start, and I would say that an issue I think that's near and dear to all of our hearts is water. We need water for our cows, for our animals on the farm, and if we were ever to have water that isn't 100% quality, our animals would be sick, and that would affect our entire livelihood. It would affect our health. We live on the farm. So I think we can all agree water is important, and we are always on a journey as farmers to get better, to get more efficient, as Lloyd said. And I think the issue I would talk about, maybe using water as an example, is the perception that's out there in what I would call, just general urban consumers in general, is that, farmers are bad and we're not taking care of our resources, and we're, doing things that, aren't in the best interest of the environment. And I would argue exactly the opposite. And I think that farmers have typically stayed home and done what they're supposed to do and do what we do well, producing our food, producing our crops. And we really don't have a lot of time to come and talk like we should to consumers and the public and to groups and explain what we do and why we do it. I think we finally woke up to that maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So we are here today as part of that, talking with you and sharing and listening and talking more about what we're doing so you can understand where we're coming from. We want to hear what your concerns are. So I think just public perception is a really tough one, and I don't want farmers to be, guilty until proven innocent, because then we're on the defensive and we waste a lot of our time and energy doing those kinds of things. But when it comes to water as an issue, we care just as much, if not more, because we're there. We live it. Our cows and our calves have to drink that water. And we want to do the right thing. We are doing everything we can to make sure that water stays clean, that it's going to be cleaner down the road, that we have crops that use water efficiently, that we use water very efficiently throughout our entire operation, so we're not, wasting it. And I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I guess we're here today to try and do a little bit of talking about how we can make that better so that it's easier for people to understand facts and talk to a real farmer. I guess you'll hear me say that several times, but I think you need to talk to a real farmer. And the neat thing about Wisconsin is that we have diversity. There's all kinds of farmers, and I'm so happy for that. Every farmer, every family can find their own way. There's so many options for production agriculture today. There's no one right way or wrong way or anything. There's so many opportunities for diversity. So I think reaching out and understanding where farmers are coming from, why they do what they do, really I'd like to say that everyone has an opportunity and a responsibility to do that better on the farm production side as well as the consumption side. So that's my issue, is having us talk a lot more and not be just assumed guilty. I'm proven innocent on any issue.
I would echo some of those sentiments on the environment, but a little different take. How we regulate how we do environmental regulation in Wisconsin doesn't make any sense. Instead of focusing on where the pollution is and how to fix it, we pick groups of people and we just decide to regulate them. And then we pick an arbitrary number of animal units to say, you have to follow this set of rules, and everybody with less animal units than that doesn't have to follow any rules. And that's wrong. That's just flat out wrong. And then I take it one step further. The municipalities in Wisconsin don't have to follow strict environmental standards like farms do, like large farms do. And that's wrong. And the reason that I think that it's politically motivated by the politicians aren't going to get in office if they spend money on municipalities to update their wastewater treatment systems that are way undersized. And they only have to report the pollution on a 4-inch rain or over a 2-inch rain. They only have to report what runs over and what runs into the rivers. And I would use our Milwaukee as an example, or even our hometown Watertown. All they have to do is put it in the newspaper how many gallons ran over, and I would admit it's pretty diluted out because it's mostly rainwater, but it still is pollution. We're not allowed to do that on the farm. We're required to have storage for all the rainwater that even comes in contact with an animal lot. So, and we're not allowed to have 1 gallon run over. So different rules for different people. Politically, nobody talks about the municipalities too much. Like Lake Mendota, the farms are blamed for Lake Mendota, but look at all the green lawns and the over application of fertilizers and chemicals that go on those lawns, and that the lawns that are right next to Lake Mendota, that water runs right in. And if these nutrients really leach and run off, well, I think so. I would take a different approach to environmental regulation. I would regulate where the problem is and come up with some solutions that are practical and easy. Not just say, okay, this group of people, you have to do quarterly reporting to the Department of Natural Resources, even though you've never polluted, even though your water tests immaculately clean, even though your cows are well taken care of and you have great farming practices, and we're gonna regulate you because you have over 700 cows, and that's just wrong.
Thank you to both of you for sharing those important opinions. So thank you for also talking a little bit about having different takes or views on similar issues, and I think we'd like to echo that in the rest of our conversations today. And before we start, we'd like to bring up some ground rules, since we'd like everyone to be able to fairly talk. In general, we just want to make sure that we're having a conversation that respects everyone, so not talking over each other, and truly listening to people and trying to understand where they're coming from, and not necessarily feeling like you have to change your view.
Hi everyone. Thanks for the invite, Greg. I have a couple of questions actually to start. I don't know if that's okay for the
Sure.
for the guests that we have in there. I wanted to know how immigration policies can be impacting farms in Wisconsin, especially in the work that they are doing. How, if they see any changes with the current climate regarding immigration and the dairy farmers. I mean, they have workers probably. I know that the dairy industry has a lot of Mexican workers, and I wonder how things have been changing in the last years with the new climate that we have. Not new, but it's becoming increasingly more difficult for Mexican farmers or Latino farmers.
Well, at Rosy-Lane Holsteins, we have some Mexican staff members. I guess I don't think of them particularly as immigrants. I just think of them as Rosy-Lane team members, and they're there to help us. And we have some workers, many of them that have been there 10 or 15 years. Some of them are new, and they've come through the TN visa program that we found very useful on our farm. Immigration policies are an issue across all of Wisconsin, and most dairy farms I know, many of them anyway, have some kind of immigration issues that they've dealt with. You know, I can't speak to anything specifically, but most of them have workers on their farm from Mexico.
All right. I think like Daphne said, we look at them as everybody as a team member. And it's amazing how we have a very diverse team. We have some Hispanic females, Hispanic males. We have old white guys like me, and we have everything in between. So we have a multicultural workforce. We've had people from Russia, Denmark, Germany, Italy, Canada, and Mexico, and Guatemala work on our farm, and everybody gets along great. And I think the people that immigrate here came here for a better life, and they didn't move here because they love our weather, and so everybody wants to have a better life, and that's what they're here for. And the immigration policy, I guess, is even worse than the environmental policy, but it's a federal issue. The U.S. Congress has to, well, in my view, should be the ones that come up with a solution for it. And so it has been, you know, we need workers. Eventually I think there's been a big movement toward robots to milk cows, and I think that'll increase. Let me say about the talent of the immigrant workers is incredible, and the work ethic is incredible. We have one of our team members my partner Jordan, he trained, our business partner Jordan, he trained one of the guys that was really good with cows. He can run the ultrasound machine and find a 30-day pregnancy in a dairy cow. And he's very talented, and he's as good as any veterinarian in the state of Wisconsin at his job. And so very talented, you know, they spend money, they live good, and they're thrilled to be here, and their kids are getting really great education. So I think opening up immigration more would be a really great thing for our country. We don't have enough labor, we don't have enough talent to maximize out the American economy, and that's one way of doing it.
Thank you. I guess I really appreciate those responses, and I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about from the urban perspective. And while I know that is maybe happening, maybe in the some areas in Wisconsin, I see in the Mexican and Latino culture here in Milwaukee that families that used to come from farming are really stepping away from farming. So that in one way, I think the previous generation of farmers or immigrants were going straight to work in farms. as farm workers. But I think lately the kids, so the second generation, third generation, really are stepping out from farming. Many situations with that. In one is like I think it's a cultural shift that is happening in Latino families, that they are not seen as lucrative, perhaps, and also they want more education for their children. However, my point is that the children also, they cannot go to college if they came here young, and they cannot access to. Right now, we have an issue with the DACA policy. In summary, I just want to say that the food and agriculture policies probably are looking, and they need to look at the immigration policies, because they are connected. And also, what are what's going to happen with the next generation of farmers, including when we think about diversity, the next generations of farmers of color. What are the opportunities that policies can kind of bring? So I think we all know that we are struggling with how much food we have. There's not enough labor, and we have these policies that are very strong, and they are scaring people away. And so the kids, the young generation is also in the same situation. They are not looking at farming. So if we look towards the future, it can be. We might not have a good scene. We need to really look at immigration as well. So that's my first.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing that subject up and having us talk about it. So if you want to introduce yourself and then just tell us a little bit about your idea, that'd be great.
Yeah, this is Paul Dittman. I'm Senior Lending Officer on the Mission Financing Team at Compeer Financial, which is Farm Credit System Cooperative that serves Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois. I know, Lloyd and Dapne, you said that your farms have been profitable for a number of years, which is great. There's a lot of farms that obviously have been suffering the last couple of years from the downturn in the dairy economy, and I've been giving a lot of thought to this because we're dealing with it on a daily basis within our organization. And prior to coming to work for Compeer, I ran the Wisconsin Farm Center at the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, where we were dealing with farmers in trouble all the time. And so I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts about maybe what policy issues or what policy could be driven at the state level in particular to help farmers. I've got a few ideas too, but I kind of want to hear what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I would change the way we do property taxes. I think property taxes should, of course, it's going to sound very self-serving, but just because you own farmland, I mean, the property taxes mostly go to fund schools, so I think higher taxes on high-end houses and residences would be more appropriate. And by taxing the people that have benefited the most from education, you know, with better houses and stuff. And right now, property taxes for most of the farms in the state, I don't know if people are defaulting on them. I would have no idea, but it's pretty tight out in the country. And so I think some of this is driven by we've overproduced, and when the Chinese kind of ran out of money and stopped buying from us, or the dollar strengthens, that really impacts the overall farm income. And like the saying is, high tide raises all boats. Well, the tide's pretty low right now, and so the boats are kind of bottoming out. And so it's been 4 years. You know, we're on our 5th year now of low prices, kind of caused by a worldwide glut of products, all commodities, whether it be oil. Whoever predicted that oil would be $40 and $50 a barrel right now? Remember when it was only going to be $300 a barrel the rest of our lives? And So there's a worldwide glut of commodities, and we've become really efficient at mining. So, I mean, that's long-winded answer for that.
Paul, I think one thing I didn't learn as a journalist was a lot about accounting, but farmers have a responsibility, if they're running a business, to do a good job and to know where your cost centers are, to know where you make the most money. And I think all farmers need to spend a little more time at their desk. We all do chores every day, but it's a responsibility that you should take care of your business. And by the way, it just happens to be a farm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, and part of it is the job that I do with Compeer. I work a lot with people who are doing value-added processing or marketing products direct to consumers, farm to table sorts of things. And the reliance that agriculture has had, and an increasing reliance on overseas markets, which can be pretty fickle. And when those markets dry up, they tend to dry up pretty quickly. And when we've relied on them too much, it causes our commodity prices to crash. What challenge that we have, though, from the lending side, if we're trying to help a value-added business in a small town in Wisconsin, a lot of times the value of commercial real estate in a small town, especially now, is pretty low. And so those businesses don't have a lot of collateral to support a loan proposal. And so it's something I've been thinking about. What can the state do, whether it's through the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority or Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, maybe creating a rural finance authority like they have in Minnesota that can support infrastructure development or small business development in rural communities. So those are some of the things I've been kind of toying with lately.
Thank you, Paul. Did we have Jennifer on the line from Menominee Nation? No, she might not have joined us. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Keith Ripp. Wear many hats yet. Also a farmer. Served in the state legislature and also at the Department of Ag as Assistant Deputy Secretary. Paul brought up a good point. I know the Dairy Task Force 2.0, I believe, has a proposal where they're looking at some of that. Dapne, are you on that task? Okay. So that the task force is generating some ideas. Where they're at now, I'm out of the loop on that, but I know that was one proposal that one subcommittee had moved forward and stuff. So also with farming, it's a grain, livestock, a diverse operation. And I guess Paul and Dapne touched on it too a little bit. I mean, we have to crunch numbers. You have to make everything work on paper. If it doesn't work on paper, it's not going to work outside at the farm. We pretty much have a pretty diverse operation. Also have a trucking business, transportation, primarily egg commodities. Sons are involved a little bit. My youngest son also is diverse already. He has a couple of different entities. So he does custom work. I also do some custom work with equipment when time allows and stuff. And so it's those little things. Diversification, I think, is a big component of everything, though. And like I said, even if you're just a small dairy farmer, look for niche markets, but also, it's got to work on paper. If it doesn't work on paper, it will not work outside in the real world. So.
Thank you.
This feels very formal. My name is David Lee, the Executive Director of Feeding Wisconsin. Thank you, former Assemblyman Ripp, for sponsoring our bill from, I think it was last session. To sort of start on the problem that we're facing, there's about 150 million pounds of fresh food that doesn't go marketed in our state. It either gets plowed under as a soil additive or just gets otherwise not utilized. And so at the same time, there's about 600,000 people in our state that don't have enough food, particularly fresh food. So our idea really is to how do we get some of the resources and partner with either private industry or the state legislature to be able to go out and get some of that food and get it into our supply chain. A really great example is a couple and for us, our big challenge, we're the State Association of Food Banks, right? The big challenge is cost. And a great example is a couple of years ago, we rescued, I think, 15 tons of great Wisconsin-grown apples that were too bruised to be distributed. They were heading towards a pig farmer. We rescued it. We stopped the trucks. We directed to our warehouses, and we decided we were going to make incredible, locally grown, unsweetened applesauce. Pay everybody in the supply chain and just see how much it would cost, just so we understood how much it would cost to actually rescue surplus, get into our supply chain, distribute it to people. It costs us twice as much than us just go out to buy applesauce on the market, right? So it would have been cheaper for everybody to just throw those apples away. Wisconsin-grown apples that required soil, labor, water, sunlight, energy, right? And we think about like the cost of food waste is pretty incredible. So I think our idea is, how do we minimize food waste? How do we minimize waste in general? How do we increase efficiency? And how do we utilize and bring together a diverse stakeholder group to see where we can find those points of leverage to make it work? Thank you.
So actually, my idea kind of piggybacks on what Paul was saying, actually, about some kind of investment program. Tying into what I do as the food policy director for the city of Madison, one of the things that we're supportive of is an operation called Feed Kitchens, which is a shared commercial space. And I'd like to see some kind of investment from the state of Wisconsin, whether it be prioritization from WEDC or some other organization, that would really drive and allow entrepreneurs from all corners of the state to be able to tap into their talents to create very unique kind of value-added food products. Things that have cultural backgrounds and histories to them, cultural origins. But some of the problems that folks face is, they don't have access to traditional capital, whether they have, barriers in their own background, they have credit issues, or they have legal issues. Additionally, there's not a lot of technical assistance that exists out there. So again, I don't know if it's necessarily a policy, but it's more of a program or an investment in Wisconsin. I mean, if we could get feed kitchens in every corner of the state, I really think that you could make some headway on economic mobility for large portions of the population, especially because, to some extent, if you're talking about value-added food products, I mean, the barriers to entry are much lower than, say, I always like to use the example of starting an airline. It's very expensive to start an airline, but if you want to start a salsa or a sauce or some other kind of, preserved product or value-added product, it's much cheaper to do that. I also think, tying into some of the agricultural concerns we're having with the commodities markets right now, if you actually boost the local demand for certain products, specialty products, you can start to actually shift the supply side of the equation as well. Now, that it would take a massive investment, I think, and a massive amount of demand to do so, but it's not a super far-fetched idea to actually start thinking about that, right? If you have folks who say have 200 or 300 acres and they're growing corn and soy, could you take aside 5 or 10 acres of that and have a specialty contract with somebody, right? So that's how we can kind of start the ball rolling on diversification, I think. So again, from a small and mid-sized food enterprise opportunities point of view, I'd like to see the state really invest more in that. And I think we have some opportunities at our disposal to start actually looking into that and making that a reality.
Hi, I'm Roger Williams, and I'm a very active volunteer at this point in time after 33 years as a professor at UW-Madison and UW Extension. And much of my volunteer work has been with farm families. Started the Harvest of Hope Fund, which provides financial help to farm families going through tough times. I'm also a volunteer mediator with the State Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. And I'm on the board of the Food, Faith, and Farming Network. And through all three of those roles, I've become very familiar with the stress that farm families are experiencing. And there's a recent article in the Sunday, January 27th issue of the Wisconsin State Journal that, Chloe, you referred to a little bit earlier. And that put a sharper point on the issue. They talked about the increasing threat of farm suicides, and also provided a number of statistics related to what's happening on the farms. We lost 961 dairy farms just last year in 2018, and we're losing about 500 a year. We're down now to right around 8,000 dairy farms from 16,000 in 2003. Because of this stress that's on the farm, our Food, Faith, and Farming Network developed a series of 5 listening sessions in southwestern Wisconsin to get at what are the issues that people are facing in southwestern Wisconsin. And we found that there were very different responses across the 5 sessions, but the basic summary could come down to 12 issues. And I'll just read through them kind of quickly. The current farm economic crisis, transitioning farms to the next generation, providing young farmers with access to land and resources, providing mentors to new and young farmers, dealing with food deserts in small rural communities, providing local farmers with access to local food markets, the issue of skilled labor for farms and non-farm situations, the need for agricultural processing facilities, fostering communication between agricultural sectors, the lack of access to the internet, the need for affordable housing in rural areas, and low incomes and poverty in small rural communities. This is a pretty good summary of what we found in those 5 listening sessions. So there's a need to be addressing each and every one of those issues. Greg Lawless was at the listening session that we did in Fenimore, and I think it helped to provide some of the inspiration to him to develop what we're calling a agriculture-supported community development initiative. And Jessica Spayde will be saying a little bit more about that. But I just want to say that the Food, Faith, and Farming Network has endorsed and is supporting this concept, as is the Wisconsin Local Foods Network, which Jessica will represent. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That was a wonderful intro, and thank you for providing the inspiration for the grant program that I'm going to talk about. So I'm Jessica Spayde. I'm the statewide coordinator of the Wisconsin Local Food Network, and happy to be here. So thanks for our 2 minutes. And what I do is I talk to people from across the state. So I go around, talk to hundreds of people, and really it's to engage and connect and empower different organizations and different individuals who are all working on equitable food systems, sustainable, resilient, and healthy food systems. And one of the things that I do is I talk to people and I ask, how do we support all these great initiatives that are going on? And there's tons of great work happening in Wisconsin, and I just always want to say, well, how do we kind of push the ball forward just a little bit more? How do we support all the great initiatives that are going on in local communities who are trying to address local, social, and economic issues through food and agricultural initiatives? And it's huge, right? They're doing great work. So, and then the second kind of question on that is, how do we also help these people, who are doing these great initiatives? How do we help them in a way that promotes equity in the food system and in our society? So big questions, right? So in our conversations, we came up with inspired by the Food, Faith, and Farming Network, and conversations with Greg Lawless from Extension and the Food, Faith, and Farming Network, came up with the idea of, well, we need a new statewide grant program, a competitive grant program that anybody can apply to, any community that's working within this sphere can apply to. But not just any competitive grant program. We want something that is actually equitable and accessible to people. So there's kind of a lot of front end work that has to happen there. And part of it is just acknowledging that we don't all start at the same starting line. We exist in an uneven playing field, basically. So how do we actually help communities come up with a lot of that basic work that needs to get done before you're even ready to apply for a competitive grant program? So feasibility studies, community food assessments, any sort of needs assessment that you need in order to argue your case that you guys need money. So that's kind of our two-step process of, providing that equitable playing field, connecting people with the technical assistance that already exist in Wisconsin, like through extension, through other departments, and then getting the money in the state budget to actually provide funds for implementation for all these great initiatives that are going on. So we have a few conversations coming up that I'd like to invite everybody to. Everybody should have their little flyer. So we're partnering with Feeding Wisconsin for our annual summit, the Hunger and Health Summit. And at that, we have a session that we're actually going to talk, and dive into this, pushing this grant program forward. So I want to invite you to that conversation, and thanks for the...
Thank you. Gosh, so much I could talk about, but I only got 2 minutes. So I guess I'll start by saying my name is Donale Richards. I currently work for Mentoring Positives, but I'm also an entrepreneur myself. Went to school here at UW-Madison and got my degree in biological systems engineering. So I'm also a cows person. I guess the biggest thing to me these past couple years, I've been kind of exploring kind of this industry we talk about, agriculture. What does it truly mean? For someone kind of just coming out of college, there was, I guess, an idea planted that there's this huge gap, right? There's a lot of people who need to enter this industry, and where I'm thinking of it is we got more people coming onto this earth. How are we going to feed all these people? It's a huge stress on farmers. It's going to challenge our current systems. But I've also been working a lot with youth and how this stuff is communicated to youth. I still see a flaw in how that communication is presented to the young populations. There's kind of this expectation that they're going to fill the shoes of farmers who've been doing this for decades. There's a lot of families who've been doing this for centuries. How that stuff is communicated is still what I'm seeing as an issue. I've kind of taken it myself as an individual to kind of share what I've learned to those individuals. But I don't see that really being as effective in a school setting. So that stresses a lot of kind of after-school programs, alternative programs for kids to learn about this stuff. Great, we have a lot of that. I still see some issues with it. And the biggest issue that I have is that we tend to focus a lot on the diverse populations and trying to kind of get over this cultural setback that, you have two different backgrounds that you're trying to ultimately get two different populations to understand each other and their needs. That process takes time, and I don't think we necessarily are thinking about how much time that truly takes. I know that there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of deadlines, there's things that get in the way. But for me and my personal belief, it's trying to work on the education system. How do we start to communicate that there are all these opportunities to work on a farm? Not a lot of us are thinking about, well, how do we get these kids to the farm? What about the transportation? The little things like that, the logistical stuff, aren't really thought about a lot. It's more of the content. We are getting a lot better at how it's becoming more culturally appropriate, but I think there is this huge conversation that's left out about the history. Why did we get to this point? Why are we growing the way that we are currently today? Is it that much different than what's been done thousands of years ago? Those kind of conversations I think is more so the starting point and the educational behind it. And if we really want to fill in this gap of labor and trying to get more people plugged into this type of industry, we need to be a lot more intentional about what's actually presented to the young people. So I guess that's one of my takes.
Hi, my name is Sarah Lloyd. I'm a dairy farmer from Columbia County. I also work for the Wisconsin Farmers Union. And one of the policy ideas that I'd like to put on the table is back to kind of what Paul Dietman put forward and some other folks talked about is what is the financial or debt financing available right now as an emergency stopgap for our dairy farmers. I think the ideas of working with people to diversify is good. Wisconsin Farmers Union is doing federal work on trying to get supply management put in place so that we can actually get a decent price from the market that would sustain our farms. But if we lose 100 cow dairy right now, we're not getting that 100 cow dairy back. And we need some emergency debt financing that'll give people a little bit of a lifeline. And I would like to ask the state to really look at the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Corporation and WEDIC, and are there county revolving loan funds? Can there be loan guarantees that be put in place? And we need them now because the stress is real for people. We're losing all these farms. We have a long-term goal of really shifting pricing policy that comes at the federal level, but that's not going to happen overnight, and we're losing farms every single day. So that's what I would like to ask for as a policy.
Thank you.
Want to try Zoom maybe?
Is there anyone on Zoom who wants to raise their hand?
Hi, I'm Dawn. I'm a nurse up in central Wisconsin. Anyway, I have a question for Mr. Lee, as well as our guest speakers. In light of many states wanting to be carbon free in the future, such as California and Minnesota, is there any thought of getting in promoting biogas production using manure and food waste digestion? And I'm wondering if that's with 1,000 head dairy, if that's something that they're utilizing on their farm. Thank you.
I can respond to that. We looked into biogas. The problem is that when you sell electricity, it's not worth anything. And the break even on those is somewhere around 15 cents a kilowatt. I don't know if anybody in this room is paying 15 cents a kilowatt for your electricity. And then there has to be a margin to manage the grid, and for the whatever electric company service that you're dealing with has to make a profit. And so biogas is one of those things that's really a great technology. It's great science. It's wonderful, but economically it's a non-starter. And if I would go to any bank right now that knew about biogas and had some of these systems working, a lot of the farmers I know that have them have shut them down because they couldn't make them pay, not because the technology didn't work. We cannot, I don't think, the United States runs on cheap food and cheap energy, electricity, fuel, and food. When those things happen, when everything's cheap, like right now, the general economy does great, but it puts a world of stress on the people producing the commodities that are cheap. So, I'd just like to respond with my opinion on what Sarah said. On the surface, it sounds good to get financing, new financing to economically distressed farms. But once we give them the loan, then what? I'd rather see better trade agreements moving this stuff out, even if we have to sacrifice a little profitability to get the stuff moved out, to get retrenched into a little better food demand. Because if we just put loans out there right now, and I'm not saying that she's wrong, and I agree with some of the things, but I'm just saying, just putting loans out there, now what? Now I have more debt and I have the same price. Something has to be done on the demand side. I guess, limiting supply is one of the things that could be done. But I would say, moving the stuff into the world food chain is probably going to be a better solution.
Oh, okay. I'm a grad student in the Nelson Institute, and I wanted to add on to the thought about how we're educating on farm systems and actually making it an attainable thing for new farmers to come into the field. Another group I see that needs more education is members of academia, within my field particularly, which is kind of just wildlife conservation overall. Sometimes we're working with farmers on carnivore livestock coexistence, And personally, the way that I was educated on agriculture in academia as an undergrad painted farmers as corporate CAFO owners. So I didn't really know that small farmers still exist. And I think that's a really huge problem and making huge social barriers between how academic people who could be working on these issues with farmers who are working really hard. And I would like to see that change. And that's something that I'm thinking about right now. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Rita Hindin. My background is public health. I'm most passionate about food and food systems as central to public health. For over a dozen years now, I've been advocating for an idea that in some ways is reaching larger, and maybe it has to be state or national policy, that a college education should include education about food literacy and systems thinking. Use food but the academic institutions have basically two major functions. One is to teach academic courses, and the other is to provide food and often housing to their students. What about if we opened up campus food systems and did on college campuses what they're doing to teach math in kindergarten? You cut a pie in 4 sections, but you could do it in all the cultural studies. I mean, food is part of culture. You could do it in the environmental studies. You could do it in all the humanities, most of the basic sciences, maybe not astronomy. And so it's not chipping, a little piece here and a little piece there, but we're facing climate catastrophe, and food is the most accessible entity that's part of all of our lives. Why don't we have a paradigm shift on college campuses and use the existing campus food system to teach about where things come from? Can we get that into Wisconsin policy and let this state be a model for the nation?
Hi, I'm Randy Zogbaum. I'm an agriculture instructor at MATC here in Madison. And one quick thing, this isn't a policy, but as an agriculture instructor within the technical college system, a big part of what me and my colleagues do is teach the farm financial aspects and getting those tools in the hands of farmers. And I agree with everybody who mentioned that before. But I'm more interested right now. I'm a soil scientist by training. Wife and I are both Cal's grads too. Actually, both soils grads as well. I've been working in soil and water quality now for the better part of the last, actually over 20 years. And right now we have a package of practices that really get to and give us an ability to address soil and water quality issues very easily and practicably on the farm, which is soil health. So I feel very strongly that gives us a great opportunity and a very easy low-hanging fruit to get those policies into DACAP and into the DNR and move those things forward. We'll see a lot of positive change in a lot of the aspects of this.
We're getting some good comments on the
Okay.
chat box just to,
Let me read some of these. A need I see is for aggregation and distribution of local produce from small growers, especially in rural areas. Could there be policies or incentives to encourage this? That was from Sister Kristen Tomey. And then from Todd Roth, we have, how about addressing the minimum wage to a living wage? The single greatest barrier to the viability of diversified local markets is people's ability to afford the true cost of that food. From Liam Hutchinson, I think the old Oscar Mayer plant on Madison's east side would be a great place to distribute and engage with local distribution. That doesn't handle the rural problem, but it does provide a market hub for small growers to aggregate and distribute. A co-op structure could function well if there was enough demand for such an entity for smaller growers. Sister Kristen Tomey says, thanks, Liam. A good point about the demand. I have been wondering how much aggregation can help drive demand, especially on the part of institutions, for local produce, because it's often so much easier for them to purchase from a distributor than to work with individual farmers. But often the burden of trying to address this issue is on the farmers. We're quite a distance from Madison. We're in Grant County, so I'd be looking for somewhere in our area, but I love the creativity in your idea. It makes me wonder what potential hub sites exist in our area.
I'll be real quick. My name is Joe Mingle. I'm part of a group called Healthy Food for All of Dane County. And I thank you for saying that thing about the climate crisis, because whether you're doing, dairy operations, commodity farming, or whatever, the next period in our agricultural history is going to have to deal with the change in climate and the impacts on farmers if there's droughts and disruptions. And so just as a general overarching theme about guiding agricultural policy in the next period, I think that's a good one. In terms of concrete policies, I think the state needs to create some sort of way to incentivize young farmers doing produce and local food production, right? So as a concrete policy, Governor Evers, please figure that out. Jessica's working on it. The other thing is, George, you mentioned it, and this is a real issue due to the transition in the international economy, the globalization of food production and stuff like that. A lot of the infrastructure for local food systems, a lot of the local food system infrastructure in communities is now gone, right? Every city used to have a cannery row where you could bring your stuff and can it. Those are all gone now. And we need to rebuild that food system infrastructure, whether it's hubs or places like Feed Kitchen or whatever it is on the community. That should also be a policy of the state to create the infrastructure in rural communities and other areas to relocalize food production. And then I am a food recovery and food waste guy. That's my work, Ed. And so I think the state can play a big role in educating producers about the laws regarding donating food to groups like mine, and help educate people about food waste. And for example, the Dells, resorts in the Dells have called us and said, do you want to come up and collect up all of our food from the wilderness? Let's have a conference in the Dells or Lake Geneva or places where there's lots of food being produced that goes to waste, and find a way to get that into the food system. And then I'm just going to say one other thing about agricultural policy, which is going to totally out me as like a hippie. But, the state of Michigan has legalized production of marijuana, right? This is a huge cash crop for the state of Wisconsin. How do we pay for all these new agricultural incentive programs? Tax legal marijuana. And so.
What a note to end on. I am from California. So thank you everyone so much for staying for the extra few minutes. And just thank you to all of our hosts again, to the Holtermans for joining us, and to everyone who spoke. We are having networking right across the hall with free food. So at least get some, say hi to someone, and you can buy a drink. And then you mentioned a conference in the Dells in March. I will be presenting along with, I think, a lot of people here. The Hunger and Health Summit. It should be on your table.
Oh, this one is in the house.
Thank you so much.